Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Empowered Educator. Can you believe we're already in and done with the second week of December? Wow, time just moves too fast. However, I have to say this week was busy for us at my campus. How about you? Yeah, we had middle of the year testing going on all week, every single day of the week. And I'm telling you, I'm not a classroom teacher, but I was feeling for my classroom teachers for sure. And here's what I kept hearing from teachers this week. I have to cover curriculum. I still have so much to do before we let out for the break. And then I heard that one small voice say, and what happens if everything I taught this month just completely goes over their head? They're not listening, they're not focused, and I'm going to have to do it again in January. And it sparked this interest in me to talk about that exact thing this week on Empowered Educator because y'all, we know it's real, right? We know that right now students' brains are mushy. They're all over the place. They're either excited about the break or, as we've spoken before, feeling a little anxious about the break. We, as teachers and educators, including your school leader, I can promise you, I've sat in that seat long enough to know we are anticipating some time to just breathe and relax. We are tired, not burnt out, just tired, right? I know you're there right with me. And that's a real concern because we're plunging on. And I don't even know if plunging is a word, but it's like we're in that deep snow, trying to get through it, trying to keep moving forward when everything is coming at us, right? I think about when I used to train for half marathons on the windy days. Today is a really chilly, windy day here in Houston. And the wind is pretty strong. And I saw someone out running this morning when I was walking the dog, and I thought, uh-huh, that's exactly how I used to feel on my runs. She was moving and moving, but it felt like she was moving in slow motion. And that is exactly how we can feel right now in December when it comes to teaching and learning. Now, we know that this week coming up probably means still curriculum to cover. It probably means that we still have work to get done, grades to finalize, missing assignments to gather, make sure that we have everything the way it needs to be so that we can end our semester well, but also all of the fun activities, right? And I don't know what it is in December, why we wait until this last week to do all the fun activities, but we tend to do so. So there's a lot happening. And we know that our main reason to be at school, not to just have children feel safe with us, but it is to educate them. But it can feel very daunting when you think, I'm teaching all of this stuff on a week where kids are not even paying attention and I need them to retain that learning. So, what do we do so that we can at least be able to come back in 2 weeks or however much time you have off and not have to feel like we're starting over from scratch? Now, I'm going to tell you, most of my experience in education was as a school leader, right? I've been in the field for 30 years. I sat in the principal seat for 16, the assistant principal seat for a year and a half. I've been a district coordinator. I've been a specialist for a number of years, about five. Honestly, I was only in the classroom for 5 years. But over that time that I sat in all of these different roles, I knew how I could help my teachers answer this very question because even though I only heard it from one person this past week, it's a question that comes up every single year. So let me share with you today a few tips on how you can attempt, no, actually do some things that will help your students retain some of the information going forward when you come back from the holiday break. Now, number one, I think that we have to have a realistic mindset. Everything that we teach this week is not going to be internalized in a way that students are going to be able to come back on day one in January and be able to write you an essay about it. be able to teach it to another student, or to be able to take an assessment on it and do a fairly good job. We have to be real about that. We have to understand that during this holiday break, students are going to be having fun with their family, having fun with their friends, hopefully, and not really having a regular schedule where they go to sleep and they practice all of their schoolwork and they do their homework and things. I've seen teachers who really think, okay, I need them to know it so that that first day back I can give a quiz, and they send homework home. I promise you that homework's not going to get done. And even as a parent, I remember thinking, and it only happened to my daughter 2 years during her entire school career. I remember thinking, what are they thinking? Because we're going to read every day, because that was important in my home, that we read every day. But we weren't going to do those packets of work. Maybe I would have her bring it on the long car rides to Iowa that we used to take every year. 16 hours in the car, you need something to do. And she didn't grow up in the era that we're in now with all the electronics that are out there. However, I would rather have had her read a book, be able to tell me what the book was about, or because there was most of the time three of us driving, we could take turns reading out loud to each other. If you're going to give homework, teachers, make it something that's doable, that's enjoyable, and do not make anything mandatory. Because even though that was important in my household, it's not important in every single household. And having that mindset that this is going to be a couple of weeks, and students may not do one thing intellectually, and be okay with that. You can't change the world, and it's not a hill to die on, I promise. So number one, we need to shift our mindset to know that this is a break. Just like you don't want to sit down and do lesson plans, you might not want to do staff development, you may not want to do any kind of learning at all. Our students don't either. Second tip for you. I would build in to this week as much review as I possibly could. Even short little bursts of things. Now, one thing I did get real good at in my classroom is that I had something every morning or whenever students entered my room, the years that I was in a team teaching situation, and before they left my classroom, that they had to do to review concepts. So the year I taught, I was self-contained fifth grade, start of the day, it was our reading class, so we reviewed reading concepts. Middle of the day after lunch was our math class, we reviewed math concepts. And then before we went home, we did something. Even if it was, I used to role play a lot, and they had to be me, and they had to be teaching whatever I put on the board, right? So I might have them teach your elbow partner how to subtract or how to multiply, depending upon the grade level that I was teaching that year. That's a fun way that you can keep your students engaged and reviewing this work so that they can have something to anchor to before they leave out. We know that there's a process on how things kind of move through our brain, right? We take in the input, then we have to practice, and then we have to apply it to something before we're really, truly ready for an assessment. So I want you to think about that. Is this a way that we could practice this week and get a little bit of a bang out of our buck, right? Before sending our students home. And then the final thing that I would make sure I would do is I would send, or I would give to my students a list. I was a binder girl. I know people are not about paper pencil right now, which I think is a shame, but it is what it is. But my students had a binder, and they had a tab for whatever content I was teaching them. And inside that binder, we kept all of our notes. And I had a very succinct system for how we did notes. One side was for certain things of the paper, the other side of the paper was for a different activity. Those were always in there, in order. And it was one of those organizational tools I taught my students. But then before any big break, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and spring break, I would give them kind of a running list of all the concepts that we have been talking about. I do this now with my tutor students too. I don't send them home with a list, but this week and last week, knowing that the weeks around Christmas, my tutoring sessions are not going to be as consistent, I am going back and doing some review of different things so that I can have some embedded supports in their minds as they leave out for the break. Now, y'all, I know these are not rocket science kind of tasks and ideas. And I also know that they're not going to fix everything, but it does give your students a little something so that they can review the concepts that you've worked so hard this year on teaching them and possibly have opportunities to make a connection with something, because that's what it's all about. When students know how to apply that learning or connect with that learning, it goes into that long-term memory, and then it's going to be there when they come back. You just might need to give some reminders. So my challenge for you this week is to set your classroom up for success. You know, consistency is going to be key. Keeping kids busy, also an important piece. But while they're being busy, make sure you're doing something meaningful that has some kind of review component so that you're not having a huge slide backwards when they're home for 2 weeks, feeling like mush, just like the rest of us, right? All right, y'all, have an amazing rest of your day. Don't fret. We just have a few days to go and we can do this. I promise we can do this. And I will not see you next week. No episode next week as we are getting ready for the Christmas holiday, but I will be back the Sunday after Christmas to get us ready for 2026. All right, have an amazing holiday and I'll see you soon.